The New York Early Childhood Professional Development Institute invited a group of early childhood leaders to discuss what interest-driven learning looks like in their programs and how they use the cycle of intentional teaching and learning in their practice.
You have to define inquiry. I think as a director, you have to define it for yourself. You have to define it for staff together collectively, and also define it for parents. I think that you start from the minute you say hello. How are you? I think that connection and taking it to this is how we function and this is your role. Like this is really from the very beginning. And allocating time in your calendars, making it part of program functioning from the very beginning. Also helping staff be comfortable with inquiry and respectful. I think that's really important for us. And whether you speak the language or not, it does not matter. I think curiosity is part of who we are, and it's part of the children that we teach, the babies.
Whoa, look, this is probably how it makes fruit. And this.
You think that's where it makes fruit?
On the flower, on this. Make fruit out of it.
There's some bushes that do make fruit.
And I think that documentation itself, too, it can take on different meanings. And I know for myself, like when I first heard the word document or documentation, I would say, well, but I'm doing that because I learned that in graduate school. Like I learned, I learned how to do the checklist. I know what that means. And it wasn't, I didn't necessarily mean it from a defensive perspective, but it was like, what else do you need me to do or document? And I do the O&R, the observation recording. I have the book. I know where the children are developmentally. But then we're invited. Well, at least for me, my lens was open. There was an opening, an awakening, an awareness that I didn't even know that I had within me. Like the art of awareness at looking at the world from a child's lens, and whatever the age they are, and looking up and out and interacting with my environment.
Our teachers also went through a process of, we all became like almost professional photographers to some extent, because we realized that we can't just take photos from up on top, far away. We have to kind of zoom in, look at what the child is doing. Sometimes just capture their hands as they're doing something, or capturing a look on their face as they discover something. So it's almost like opened up a whole new side of the teacher's practice to capture that in that way.
When I look for things that are worth recording, I think about the materials that are being used and how the child is going to use the material. So, perfect example, we have this garden. There's a big brick wall, and there's a garden that no one can go into because the children just can't go in there. So the garden had leaves, and I was like, let me clean it up. So I cleaned it up and started to plant in there, and the children would watch me go into this garden. And they're like, where are you going? Do you live back there? Because every day I was going back there cleaning up the garden. So they were just so interested because there's this big wall. So finally there were these huge weeds that were like up to here. So I pulled them up and I brought them over to the other side. And they were just like, whoa, what's that? They were like trees compared to their height. So some of them were marching around with it. And then that's when I thought, I should really get this on camera, because I didn't plan it. It just kind of happened. So I made a choice that I would document this moment. So some of the children were marching around, some of them were holding them up, going, I'm a bamboo, I'm a bamboo. There was so much going on. So then I wanted to kind of zero in closer. So I got my camera out, I put the big leaves down on the table, and they were pulling them apart, but we noticed that there was some green coming out of the leaves. So I started asking them questions like, oh, what is that coming out? And they were like breaking it open and looking at it, so I was zeroing in on this. And at that moment, I realized this is a teachable moment for them, for me, for anyone that watches this moment. And then they began rubbing the leaves, and we saw that it was leaving green marks, and we started talking about chlorophyll. And for me, the meaningful part was, what are they interested in? Are they interested in painting with it? Are they interested in the actual leaf? Are they interested in the mystery behind the wall? And so I went back and asked myself all these questions afterwards, and it was really all of it. So we gave the garden a name, and we called it the Secret Garden.
The Secret Garden.
Yeah, and then Colleen bought me a CD the next day, The Secret Garden. It was very sweet. But that's now become a thing, the Secret Garden, and I bring things over. Sometimes it's a worm. Sometimes whatever, they're berries that are falling. Sometimes I bring berries. So now every time I go back there, they know we're going to get something from the secret garden, you know? And now my thought process is every time I go back there, make sure I have my camera, because they're interested in whatever's beyond that wall. And they're so in tune. I could bring a piece of garbage, the fact that it's coming from behind that wall, and putting it on the table, and a conversation will come up. So.
And my perspective, if I can just share real quickly on that whole exploration, was that the interesting part in terms of just how it became a thread of discovery, or even a thread of documentation really, was that Jihito is mindful enough to come back from around the wall, and you noticed that the children were interested. Part of what I did when I came out, because I knew you were doing that, is I saw 8 children sitting in a half circle, just staring at the gate that Jihito opened into the secret garden.
Wow.
And they're just sitting there waiting. And it was like 20 minutes. And I sat there and I said, wow, I see all of you sitting here. What are you doing? We're waiting for Jahida. We're waiting. So then I could take that self-reflective acknowledgement of waiting to self-regulation, sensory integration.
That's right. And some of those children may not sit waiting for 20 minutes in a circle, but they, wow.
So because just who I am, whatever, I'm always thinking that.
That's deep going.
And then when you came back, how they held it, how they cooperated, approaches to learning, fine motor.
I also love how you spoke about thinking about what the kids were really interested in and kind of pulling those threads out and how to look at that. And that's such a big piece of like moving forward with the cycle of inquiry or inquiry approach. Like with your team of teachers or with your team of collaborators, what are the kids really interested in here? Let's look at this documentation. Let's think about it. Let's look at the notes that we took about what the kids were saying and expressing. What might really be their interest here? Is it the chlorophyll? Is it the idea of a secret place that we don't know what happens? And then kind of pulling those threads. That's definitely a big piece of what we do here. You were pointing out the nature pictures, and we were doing a series of visits to a natural exploration area in Prospect Park, and we did, also speaking to what you mentioned before, our parents and chaperones and teachers, we really asked everybody to be very kind of quiet, and we all had observation notebooks, and we had our cameras to take photos, and we really were thinking about what the kids were experiencing and doing, and then all reflecting back later and talking about it as adults and with the kids too. It's kind of different processes going on. The children were reflecting upon what they didn't experience, and then the teachers were also reflecting back on what they experienced. We also took some videos where the kids were just in nature, and we were, at one point, 2 little girls were making a forest soup or forest stew and mixing and doing all kinds of things. And we had to think about, okay, if we're gonna like move this on or kind of add a provocation or extend something in the classroom, what is it these girls are interested here? Or is it just a moment in time that's gonna pass? Or is there something that comes from this? So teachers like looked at this video and really thought about it. What are they interested in? Where are they gonna take this? Or is it not going anywhere? And actually these 2 little girls often do this soup making and mixing in the classroom, so it did extend in the classroom with different materials, and the teachers thought they like putting different elements together and mixing them up, and it's not just about forest school and natural materials, it's about shapes in the classroom and patterns.
Oh, that's a lot of jalapenos.
I just want you to wake up and see what's inside a child's mind. That when they scribble on a piece of paper, it's not a scribble. They have a whole story behind that scribble. And we as educators have to be awake in the classroom. That's our line of inquiry. And then the child has their line of inquiry. And then and the parents, everyone is inquiring. They want to know, and everyone has an intention. Like I've had parents say, well, what are you teaching them? They're just dancing and singing all day. Well, that's their line of inquiry. They don't understand yet. And I think the line of inquiry is so different for everyone. And once we all get on that same page of what our intention is with the materials, with the language, with the connections, I think that's when children and teachers and parents will truly thrive in a learning environment.